Module 10, Communication Climate. The communication climate is a social tone of a relationship. It's not about what you do or say with people, but it's how you feel about each other as you're communicating. Every relationship has a unique climate. The communication climate is determined by the degree to which people see themselves as valued. If they feel confirmed by a person, that means they've heard messages that say, I value you. If they feel disconfirmed, it means they've heard messages that signal a lack of regard. So I'll give you a moment to read the types of things that are confirming, the types of things that are disconfirming. Confirming messages send out statements that you are recognized, that you exist, that you're acknowledged and you matter, and that you're endorsed and that you're agreed with. Disagreeing messages are kind of in the middle. They just say, I think differently than you. But disconfirming messages go one step further. They say, I think differently, and your thoughts hold no value. So that's why in the list before, you saw things like being ignored. So it's not just that the person doesn't want to hear your message or doesn't agree with it. They can't even be bothered to hear what you have to say. And most people would say they would rather have a relationship where they sometimes argue with someone, where they disagree and argue, than one where they are ignored. Being ignored or brushed off feels worse. Your communication climate's reading also has some information on defensiveness. Even though the section won't seem particularly long, it's a really big idea, and in terms of your work in the course, if you were able to only do one thing, and that would be to reduce the amount of defensiveness you feel, you would have made great strides in your ability as a communicator. So it's worth spending some time reading and also thinking really carefully about defensiveness. So basically, defensiveness happens when you feel that yourself is being attacked. So that presenting self that we talked about in the self chapter, all the parts of the image that you're presenting to the world, you feel like someone's challenging that image. That's called a face-threatening act. And your reaction is to protect that face, and you become defensive. It's really not necessary to be defensive, because even if someone is trying to attack part of ourself, really they can't damage it unless we let them, right? But still somehow adrenaline goes and we just instantly feel like we have to be on guard. Climate patterns that you have with people take on a kind of a spiral pattern. They'll either, if they're positive, they tend to become more positive, build on positive moments to get better, but also unfortunately they can spiral down, get worse, and continue to get worse. But that rarely goes on indefinitely. If you have a really negative climate pattern, for example, at work, typically you end up leaving that job. If you have a negative spiral in a personal relationship, you stop seeing that person. Usually the ones that are hardest to end are family relationships. Sometimes we feel we can't get out of those spirals. In your text, you'll be reading about ways of being less defensive and trying to substitute defensive behaviors with supportive behaviors. So I'm going to go through them quickly because they are maybe a little bit hard to understand. The first one says, instead of evaluating, which is judging, you should try to describe. So make observations about things, but leave the judgment part out. That's less apt to create a defensive reaction. So the example they give at the bottom of this slide, you're not making any sense, would seem like an attack, and you're judging that person's ability to present a point. But if you say, I don't understand the point you're trying to make, that may make them a little less defensive, because you're kind of implying that the problem is with you. Something is blocking your understanding. If you look like you're controlling communication, that can cause defensiveness. So a problem orientation is when you try to put something back to another person and say, I'm trying to negotiate with you on meeting needs or on coming to a mutual decision. So instead of saying there's one way to handle a problem, you're saying it looks like we have a problem and we should work on it. Another way of creating a positive climate and reducing defensiveness is to not appear to be strategizing. So if you've probably met people where you feel like, why did they say that? I think they're trying to get something from me, or I feel like they're trying to manipulate me. That's a person that uses strategy a lot, and you sense it and you know it. Where you'd probably react a lot better to a person who's spontaneous. They're just, whatever is coming up in the moment is real. It's not a planned manipulation. You can also create a more positive climate by limiting neutrality. Neutrality meaning acting like you're indifferent, and instead showing more empathy. This is a pretty obvious one. We all know we would rather have someone approach us with empathy than appearing to really not care. Also, superiority, sending out a message that I'm better than you, really provokes defensiveness. But if you send out messages of equality, that person will feel like they're in a much more positive place with you and that they have value with you. Certainty versus provisionalism is also something to keep in mind. Some big words, but what it basically means is if you always approach things with certainty, I'm right, it really turns people off. Provisionalism says you might even have a strong opinion, but you're willing to say, well, maybe some things that you're saying are right, or, you know, let's try it out, or let's even agree to disagree. So provisionalism, it doesn't have that very strong wrong statement attached to it. In addition to approaching people in the ways that Gibbs suggests in order to limit their defensiveness, the text also gives you some tips on how you can become less defensive. And some of these are going to seem counterintuitive. You're going to think, that seems strange, I can't see myself doing it. But be open and consider trying this. The first thing is you can seek more information. So what you're trying to do is, if a message is coming in and it feels like it's a negative or attacking message, well, ask for more of it. Try to get to the bottom of what the person is trying to say. Ask for specifics. So what is it that I do that's unfair, for example? So you'd have to ask that in a way that doesn't sound defensive in order to get them to want to share more with you. But what you're saying is, what you're allowing is, maybe there's some truth to what they're saying. I want to explore this whole perspective. Even if you're not going to change your mind, you've bought yourself a little time to try to calm down, right? So when you're feeling defensive, usually when that emotional reaction comes with defensiveness, it's really hard to get anywhere with a person. But if you're able to take a little time, ask for more information, and at the same time use that time to calm down, you'll be in a better position. You can also guess about specifics. So that sends a message to the speaker that, I'm open to hearing more about this. So rather than seeking information by a direct question, you're kind of guessing. So the example they used was, you object to the language I used. Was it too formal? So again, you're probing for more. You can also paraphrase the speaker's ideas. So give it back to the critic. It can give you more valuable information because they may do some clarifying, but it also shows that you're willing to consider what they're saying. You can also directly ask what the critic wants. Are you saying you want me to cancel the party? Are you saying that I should have washed the dishes? Any of those kind of things, put it back to the critic and let them be very clear exactly what they wanted from you. Again, use that time to calm down. Sometimes the reason we feel defensive is because we know to some degree the other person is right. You can ask about the consequences of your behavior. So with the one about the dishes, you might be saying, well, why was it important that I did the dishes right after supper? Right? Open that dialogue with that person. Well, maybe it's okay if I watch TV for an hour first and then I go back and do them, right? Or maybe it's better if you don't leap in and do them and give me some time to do them, right? So that would open the door to having that kind of discussion. Also asking what else is wrong, because sometimes when people appear to be attacking you, they're doing it because there's another problem, an underlying problem they're not comfortable talking to you about. So think about saying, is there anything else wrong? So I know these sound, when you think about, wow, I'm in a defensive posture, would I be able to do this? Because what I want to do usually is attack back, right? I'm sure you can see how these can be more effective in trying to calm the situation and actually maybe making it a learning or a growth experience. So in addition to seeking more information, you can also use strategies called agreeing with the critic. So you can agree with the truth only when you can do it sincerely. So you might say, you're right, I didn't do the dishes right after supper. Okay, fair enough, that's the truth, right? You're going to want to go on to talk about when you would like to do them more, but in the moment, it's correct that you didn't do that. You can also agree with the odds. And what this means is if someone is trying to manipulate you, you want to let them know about the parts that you agree with, right? And also it's looking into the future. You know what their worry about the future is. So what's the real complaint, and what might you do about that? You can agree in principle. So you might be thinking, well, generally I can see why a person would want the dishes done right away. It doesn't mean that you're going to change your behavior. You're just saying, yeah, I can see why that would be. And you can agree with their perception, with the right that they have to perceive things. It doesn't mean you're going to change anything, but you can understand where they're coming from. So this is sometimes where people will say, well, let's agree to disagree.